you doing? So am I coming out really clear? All right. So thank you, Games Gathering, for having me. My name is Roee Avramot, and I've been a game design since, I don't know, 11 years now. I previously worked as an executive producer and game designer at Plarium, which I probably all of you know. And after Plarium, I've decided to focus my life in 3 major goals. So one of them is, basically is to improve my health. So I lost 32 kilos in the last 2.5 years. It's one of the things that I really put an emphasis on. The second thing that was super important for me is to open my own independent studio. I needed something like of my own. I needed some new road to go through with like-minded people and create something that is not really attached to the industry. You know, it's something that I really would love to do artistically, you know, for the soul. So basically at the Brute Squad, we're currently 5 people, but the way that we work is that we also work with other indie game studios in Israel. And the way that we work together is I scratch your back, you scratch mine. Without any money, I'm helping them with biz dev or with game design or production. They help me with, I don't know, rendering shit in Unity or something like that. So, and it's been fun. It's been fun. So currently we're working on 2 major titles. One of them is Edge Breakers, which is a game that will be released, hopefully if Nintendo won't be a piece of shit. It will be released for the Nintendo Switch, and it's a local PvP twin-stick arena shooter. All right, I won't go into the details of how the gameplay works, etc. And we are also collaborating with another game studio in Israel called Mystic GG on a game, on a vehicular combat racing game called Velocity Rage. And we're basically designing all of their weapons and tracks and the balance and everything. And it's kind of a very brutal game. And yeah, we're also working on several mobile titles. One of them is Yum Yum, which is this match 3 game where creatures eat each other in order to evolve. And it's been fun. It's been basically fun. Now, the third thing that I really wanted to put my emphasis on in my life is to come back to the basics and ask myself this question: what the hell is creativity, right? Because nowadays in game design, what happens is everything becomes super technical and super, goal-oriented. So we have this KPIs and metrics and BI, and we need to make sure that our game can make money and all the funnels of how to make money, etc. And all of these goal-oriented processes, what they create is they basically we neglect some creative stuff, right? We neglect some really basic stuff like how we think, where ideas come from. And for me, it was very important to go back into that basic stuff and look at it from a different perspective, right? Especially as a veteran in the game designer, it was very important for me to go back. So what is creativity? So basically, creativity is the process of putting our imagination to work. Anybody know who Sir Ken Robinson is? So Sir Ken Robinson, he basically founded all of the creative work in England, all of the creative work in their school systems, in their government, etc. And he has one of the most, I think, the presentation at TED with the largest amount of views or something like that. And basically what he says is that creativity is not this special gene. It's not this special gene that you are born with, and some people are not born with creativity. It's basically this taking our imagination, which is this thing that everybody have. We all have imagination because we all remember what we did yesterday, and we can all imagine what we'll roughly do tomorrow, right? And so basically imagination it's a human thing, right? We all have it. But creativity is taking this imagination, this natural tendency that we all have, and we're putting it to work. We're working really, really hard in all sorts of rituals and practices in order to create something new, all right? Dorothy Parker she's a poet, she's a writer, and she says it from a different angle. So basically, creativity is a wild mind, right? It's like we have a lot of all sorts of thoughts and ideas and images, whatever, but it also requires this really, really disciplined eye, right? We need the discipline to really understand what's good, what's bad, how to harness those really, really good golden veins of creativity and how to create some amazing stuff out of it. All right, so again, creativity is not something that you are born with. It is something that you need to work really, really hard, and each and every one of you can do it, all right? If somebody tells you, oh, you're not creative, you cannot be creative, tell them to shut the fuck up, all right? Because you can all be creative. It's super important to know. So, but basically, before we can be creative, right? Before the creative process can begin, we need to be disruptive. We need to make a little bit of mess in our life. We cannot be like too rigid and too like strict or whatever. We need to create a little bit of mess. We need to be disruptive basically with our time and rituals, right? We can't like be, if you could be creative between 4 and 5 o'clock, that would be great. No, it doesn't work like that. We need to give the creative process the time and the rituals to basically go into the process of our day-to-day lives, all right? Creativity is something, it's not something that we can do on a minute, all right? It's something that needs to be, it needs to sink into our consciousness in a way. So some people, while they're washing their dishes, something comes up into their head, or in the shower. So we need basically to give it time, but we also need to embed it as a ritual in our day-to-day lives. The second thing that we need to be disruptive with is our working space, all right? We can't sit at our cubicle, rooms all around us and be creative. We need to be in an environment that is very, very playful. It's very different. So if you work at a desk office, right, and you need to be creative, I highly recommend that you'll get your ass out of it, right, and move to a different place. Go to the park, go to the strip club, I don't know where, all right, anywhere that is not your office, okay? In your office, it'll be harder for you to start being creative. You need to be in a totally different place, okay? And in addition to that, we need to be disruptive with our mindsets, right? We need to switch basically into 2 modes of thinking, all right? Each and every one of us, more or less, have 2 modes. One is a closed mode, where you have tasks after tasks, and you need to be on time, and you need to be efficient, and you need to know what you need to know, right? You need to do stuff. All right, take this from A to B. There is no guesswork. There is no what if or whatever. You don't ask too many questions. You need to get the work done. So this is a closed mentality. But in order to be creative, we need to be playful. We need to move. We need to create some kind of a safe mentality where it's okay to be goofy. It's okay to dance. It's a safe place to make mistakes. It's a safe place to be a child again. It's very, very important to be a child again when we are creative. Because I don't know if some of you remember, being a child means also being able to look at life like in fresh eyes and ask a lot of questions, all right? So after we dealt with all of those 3 components, we basically can start by releasing the spark, right? Everything starts with a spark. All the creative process, it starts with this, a toilet that can fly and have some Twix in it. It's a bad idea. Right? It starts with something. Now, each spark basically always starts with a question, right? it always starts with a question. For example, what if we mixed FIFO with Demolition Derby? What happens? Anybody knows? Exactly, Rocket League, right? And another question. What are the questions behind this game? What is the what if? Exactly. What if we mix Super Mario Brothers and XCOM? So we basically ask a lot of very, very basic questions of what if we did this and added that, or changed this and added this. It's basically a clash of ideas, right? And we ask basically those clashes of ideas in many different ways, right? So, but what's very, very important to remember is that the mind, it never makes big jumps, all right? It's not like we jump from one question to the next and we create the whole game, right? Unlike what I presented earlier. So for example, if I'm highly creative and I created something freshly new, so from the outside, you will look at what I did and I said, you will say, oh my God, how did you do that? It'll look like I did this amazing jump from one creative idea to another great creative idea. But basically what happens is that the mind always takes small steps. So for example, this is like a map of the neurological nodes that you all have in our mind. So in order to basically jump from one point to the next, or from one idea, or one image, or one feeling, or one memory to the next, we cannot jump like 5 steps. We need to jump from one step to the next, and then that broadens the area of possibility, etc., etc. And the way that we do that, the way that we basically jump from one element to the next is by basically asking questions, all right? Now, we ask those questions in many different ways, right? And all of those questions, they kind of interlink with each other. So we ask questions in narrative and aesthetics and mechanics and theme, right? Game design basically encapsulates roughly 4 of those pillars. There are more pillars, but those are like the general pillars of game design, right? And all of those pillars, when we ask questions in each and every one of them, they kind of interlink with each other. They affect each other in a certain way, and each question kind of broadens the way that we see, like, how ideas come from, right? And it's not only from games, it's also from psychological issues that we personally have or other people have. It can be from art and music that we consume and love. It can be from storytelling that we all share, I don't know, at home while smoking weed. Or it can come from all sorts of social issues, right? Demonstrations and stuff like that. Right? And all of those questions that we ask, all of the mixes that we create from several of these core pillars that surround our creative life, they all kind of slowly but surely merge into this new something that wasn't there before. All right? So basically the mixing of ideas is endless. We can mix ideas from each and every one of those fields into new possibilities. And what happens is we create some kind of an iterative cycle, right? We basically, the mixing of ideas into a new possibility generates more ideas, which basically, which creates more possibilities, that basically leads to too many ideas. Oops, it's not broken. All right, so it basically leads to too many ideas sometimes, right? It's very, very hard. It's like when the mind goes into this iterative cycle, right? Sometimes, like, oh my God, too many ideas start to erupt. And the questions that arise from that is, one, how can we deal with this overload of too many ideas? Raise your hand if you have experienced this thing when you have an overload of ideas. All right? We all have it, right? We all have this, like, a notebook with madmen scribbling, like, with tons of ideas that none of them are good. They're all piece of shit. Now, and we don't know which one is good and how to basically extract those gold nuggets that we can create a game from eventually. And in addition to that, we don't know what's good or bad. We have no idea if it's good or bad. We have no idea how to benchmark our ideas, right? And one of the key fundamental tools that I personally use, and a lot of the game designers and artists that I know use, is the culling criteria, okay? It's basically this model that we have in our head that creates this, you'll understand. You know what? It's kind of difficult to understand, to present it on this slide, so you'll understand. We basically, this culling criteria, what we do in it is we create something that I call a mental gameplay model. It's like this movie that we have in our head that goes in repeat over and over and over and over. So fighter jet pilots, what they do is, for example, if they have, I don't know, a malfunction in their aircraft, what they do is they create all those scenarios in their head where they relive the mistakes or the, I don't know, bugs or whatever that their aircraft can have. So when it happens in real life, they already know what to do. So if the engine will explode, they will tell, okay, the engine explodes, so you push this button, I push this lever, and they basically create this movie in their head over and over and over and over and over and over again until when it happens, unfortunately, they already been there. They already relived that crisis. And game designers, we do the same thing, right? We create some kind of a movie in our head that repeats, right? It's like a visualized story of our planned game. And while looking at this movie, and by adding basically new stuff to it, we kind of see what works, what doesn't work, if it feels okay, it doesn't feel okay. Like we have some kind of a movie that enables us to kind of judge if it feels good or not, if it kind of sticks to this movie that we have in our head, right? Now, the problem with this is that it's only in our heads, right? If I would need to present that movie to somebody else, to you, it'll be very, very hard for me to present it in words. So what we basically do, we need to communicate those movies that we have in our heads, right? And we can communicate it by basically writing everything down and create some kind of a concept or some kind of a keynote or a presentation, right? We basically write them down and present them to others. And in addition to that, what we also can do is we can create some kind of a storyboard. This is a storyboard that we did for the trailer for Edge Breakers. So we create all sorts of very, very simple images of how the game will work. Now, for those who don't know how to draw, usually what I do is I just take a lot of images from Google and I create some kind of a gameplay storyboard that it basically helps me to present the movie that I have in my head. And when I present it to somebody else, that virus that I had in my head on repeat, I kind of infect others with it, sort of, all right? So this is like two of those tools is something that we usually do. Like, are there any game designers that do storyboards before they create all sorts of flowcharts to just present the game to others? Is it somebody that others do, or is it something that only motion capture animators do? Anybody uses? All right, cool. So in addition to that, we also playtest a lot. And we playtest by creating paper mock-ups or a simple code, because we need something that to reflect all of those bad ideas or good ideas. We need to test it with something, right? And we need to show it to other people as well in order to validate if a good idea is a good idea or is it just a piece of shit. Right? So we basically enter this mix, test, repeat process, ongoing and ongoing, until basically what we need to do is to generate some kind of a value. Something needs to sync from all of this process, right? Something needs to stay, to basically feel good, like the mechanics needs to feel good. The look and feel of the game needs to feel good. And we do that until we have enough data, right? But we need to know, right, when enough is enough, right? How, like, we can go through this entire iterative process on repeat forever and ever. So we need to know when to stop, right? And we stop, but when we roughly know how it feels, right? How it looks, how it plays, and how it affects others, right? We create something that is tangible, something that other people can see and feel and hear and play, like, yeah, the stuff that we basically had in our head, or we only had on our notebook, right? So once we have all of those things, we can boil our ideas into a concept. Now, I don't know how I'm with the time, but this is the entire creative process. I don't know if you can see. I'll go from here. Sorry. So everything starts with a spark, right? And the spark generates a brainstorm that we share our ideas to each other, right? And then we have a culling criteria that tells us if it's a bad idea or a good idea. If it's a bad idea, we throw it away. But if it's a good idea, it's doing two things. It brings us new ideas, right? But it also it generates value, right? Oh my God, it fits. So let's put it aside, all right? And once we generate enough value, we can consolidate all of this data that we have into some kind of a concept, right? Some kind of a concept document that can be boiled down into a proof of concept later on. Now, what's amazing about having a concept is that it generates more sparks, right? It generates more crazy ideas. So it's like this feedback loop of creativity that just goes up and up and up, and we can generate many, many concepts and test those concepts and see if they're fun with other people. And that's it, basically. That's it. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you for this inspiring talk. Yeah,
I'm on time.
Yeah, you are. Well, we had more since we don't need to have a next lecture. So.
All right.
So we have more time for questions.
Thank you a lot for your speech, first of all, and sorry for my English.
Fine, my Russian is, terrible, so feel free.
Well, I can speak Ukrainian, Charles.
Oh, all right.
No, I'm joking. About creative process, I'm learning game design for a year, and I have some kind of problem, when you are starting to develop a lot of creative ideas and looking for different ways to create games. In a lot of cases, you started to thinking and doing the same thing.
Right.
For example,
Right.
You want, to create a really cool shooter or, slasher, and you play a lot of games, you know the trends, you know what's popular, and you start in learning, creating, but in the end, actually, you have like maybe a little better product than another developers, but actually the same things that are in our in our market.
Yeah.
And in this time you really start thinking like, I want to create a shooter, but everything that I can create in my head is something like Doom or Wolfenstein or something like that. And really you're thinking, hey, maybe I'm not enough creative for create something innovative, something new. How to find a way out of this trouble?
How to basically copy pasting other ideas and using them, and they all look alike, and that's the question, right? How to break out of the mold, how to break out of what the industry kind of chews up for us 24/7. It's a really good question, and what I usually do is when I have many ideas, I also bring them into some cluster of ideas, like categories of ideas, and then I try to mix those categories together. So I don't know, I have an idea for a first-person shooter, but I ask myself, what if that first-person shooter needed to add all sorts of, I don't know, stealth elements to it? So I'm kind of mixing a cluster of ideas together in all sorts of ways. Basically what you need to do is to ask yourself more and more questions, okay, until that idea doesn't resemble something else. All right? So what if I mix Doom and Commander Keen? What if I mix Doom and, I don't know, RTS games? All right? So you need to keep mixing ideas and categories of ideas until it's slightly different from where you are right now.
Yeah, but you know, when you create like a lot of good ideas, you say to your programmer like, "Hey man, I create such cool stuff. Just make it in code." And he said, "Hey, it's too hard and it will cost a lot of money. And for example, if you indie, you have not a lot of resources for creating like a."
So basically, what you need to ask yourself is, what is the core change? What is the most important thing that your idea has? And you need to build only a very, very slim version of that idea. You don't need to build all of it, but you need to build the essence of it, right? And all right, some ideas are amazing, but it's a pain in the ass to code, and that's fine. You can basically share your ideas and the process with your developer throughout the way, and he will give you his inputs, right? And he'll give you, like, I don't know, all sorts of boundaries of where not to go or where to go. And maybe you can work in the creative process with your developer, and he can give you his side of the game, right? All right, I think I can understand how I can program this and that, but he will give you all sorts of restrictions that will basically force you to ask more and more questions. All right? So basically, if something feels like a copy-paste of another thing, keep asking questions. Keep mixing some other crazy ideas from other different things. All right? And if your programmer gives you all sorts of barriers, all right, again, start asking questions of how maybe you can break those barriers. How can you make the game simpler in a way?